So this meeting is hybrid. There are some folks joining us online. If you're online and you have a question, please type it into the chat. I think staff's going to attempt to type any of the questions in the room here on the chat as well. This room does have a little better acoustics than the bridge building, but we're going to try to keep all the online folks informed of what's going on in the meeting as well. So I guess the first item was going to be endorsement of minutes. We'll roll those to next month. And we will move the first action item to informational items. So we'll start off with the endorsement of the fiscal year 2022-2023 Unified Planning Work Program. And I will turn it over to Sean to lead us on that one.
Before we get started, I have people.
Pretty short, right? 22.
Yeah. What could we do, or is there anything we could do to, when we do have one, to provide bylaws? There may be, I know we have numbers to change the bylaws, but if it's possible for us to do that at a lower number, I certainly be interested.
That's a great point. Can staff look into?
Yeah, that's a good point. We'll take a look into membership. I think that there are some voting members right now that maybe some departments have changed. I know that there's like Metro, for instance, I think has multiple votes, and so we can take a look at that and see, are those folks still attending, or is it need for a refresh to make sure that those that are attending and participating, and we can carry out our business.
That is something that we can adjust.
Yeah, and you guys have had a lot of changes recently, so I think it's probably a good time.
Hopefully we don't have a handful of people sitting at the bridge building. But
Let's start first, and I'll look at my. I didn't realize we think they're ever again.
I think that is the case.
At least their guidance right now is that they're not hosting meetings. But did you drive over the bridge like a race car driver?
Glenn,
Yes.
This is Bill McCord over in Gallatin. I'm having difficulty hearing some of the speakers. And I don't know if there's a common microphone that could be used. I don't know if others are having a difficulty hearing that are attending remotely or not.
Bill, we can try and pass the mic around. We do have one mic for the presenters, and we can pass that around.
Okay.
If folks wouldn't mind, we can grab this microphone. If you have a question, we can take it to you.
Sorry about that. We'll get back into informational items. The first one being the endorsement of the 2022-23 UPWP. Sean?
Thank you, Glenn. So I know we've discussed the upcoming work program that'll cover the planning activities that'll be carried out by GNRC staff as well as consultants over the next 2 federal fiscal years. Today we wanted to present just the final draft that will be out for public review and comment over the next 2 weeks for your endorsement, but we'll just treat it as an informational item today. Go to the next slide. We've given kind of an overview of the different types of work that you're all familiar with that staff carries out, including outreach and engagement efforts, research and data analysis, policy coordination, and funding. Just some of the upcoming work activities that are going to be priorities over the upcoming 2 years will be finishing up. Go to the next slide. Finishing up some of our studies, including the South Corridor study and the downtown inner loop study effort. We'll also be kicking off 2 efforts that'll be like the highest priorities, being our regional traffic impact study and a regional freight study, looking to kind of finalize the scope of work and get consultants on board for those efforts. But we'll dive into more of the details with that in the coming months. And then two other items that are kind of standalone, discrete activities would be a regional conservation strategy and a pedestrian safety action plan to really implement some of those recommendations from our 2045 RTP. On the policy coordination front, one new effort of bringing folks together around a common topic that you'll hear a little bit more about later on is a project delivery task force to really work towards spending down some of the unobligated balances that we have dedicated to infrastructure projects within the region. And then continuing to the work of a congestion management task force, continuing to monitor kind of the traffic conditions and trends, not only through the pandemic, but as we hopefully come out of the pandemic, what those changing patterns may tell us and how it may inform kind of different decision makings in the future. On the funding front, we have a COVID relief funding that we're going to talk about next, but we look to follow that up with an active transportation program, Call for Projects. A lot of you have participated in that program in the past and had awards through that, which is a set aside for bicycle and pedestrian projects. And then also, as we just continue to do our data work, our data team is top notch, obviously, and kind of continuing to expand those data tools and analysis as we regroup for our next RTP update. And you'll hear a little bit more about some of those tools that have been further refined and developed since the adoption of our regional transportation plan. Next slide. And so the document, since we presented the draft, has gone through state and federal review. Some of the comments that we received related to adding some additional detail regarding the development process and how we've engaged with you all, regional partners and state partners through the process to develop this draft document. Adding some additional detail on kind of those anticipated products and outcomes that we've detailed related to some of those priority planning activities that we've identified. And obviously those will be further refined as we identify scopes of work in the coming months. And then also just clarifying different thresholds for amendments within the work program. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we do have the document available for public review and comment. We'll keep this open on our website at gnrc.org/UPWP. There's also a comment form that you can complete and offer any feedback or comments related to the draft document. You can also submit those comments at the email address comments@gnrc.org, and looking to get those comments by August 18th, which is when the Transportation Policy Board is scheduled to adopt the UPWP for the next 2 years. And that's reflected in the next slide, the schedule. And so if there's any questions, I can take those now.
Hey, Sean, this is Bill McCord over in Gallatin.
Yes, Bill.
I could either submit this by email, I suppose, or on your site. I just wanted to mention on the summary of activities there on page 35, I guess it is I see where y'all have added the Sumner County or the Sumner County-wide bike ped plan that's underway now. The sponsor there is really all of the local governments in Sumner County, and not just Gallatin and Sumner County and Tdot, but Tdot, of course, is conducting that plan, but it's really all of the local governments in Sumner County.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I think given the number of entities within Sumner County, we were struggling to capture all of those, but we can make a note of that within the document. So,
and Sean, this is Michael. I think, I think, Bill, you mean participants. There could really only be one sponsor. Is Tdot the implementing agency of the study? That's who needs to be identified. Not that we can't identify the study participants in addition.
I just don't want anybody to be left out.
Hopefully with the
Okay.
Anything else?
Do we have a quorum yet?
We do not.
Okay. All right. I was gonna make a motion to endorse the work program, but if we don't have a quorum, I guess we can't do that.
Yeah, and the endorsement is not by the TCC is not required according to our public participation plan, but we do like to have TCC support on documents that we're presenting to the Transportation Policy Board for their adoption.
Yeah, and just a note, Bill, anybody participating online is technically not a participating voting member of the TCC, so you wouldn't be able to make the motion from your position on the internet.
Oh, well, I would have made the trip over there then. I'm sorry.
So this item will move on to the policy board.
That's correct.
Are there any other follow-up questions for Sean? All right, with that, I will have to step back. I skipped over public comments in our quorum discussion on the front end. So I would like to open the floor to any public comments. If there's anyone that has any public comments they'd like to make, we have a mic and podium. Take those at this time. Okay, hearing none. You can also email your comments to comments, that's plural, comments @gnrc.org. With that, we'll move on to our next informational item, which is an update on the COVID relief funds call for projects. Sean will lead us on that one as well.
Just gonna grab the mic. Yeah. Is that? Okay. This helps for folks that are attending virtually. So the next item that we wanted to give you an update on was the COVID relief funding. Just a quick reminder, the amount of funding that we had available through the CRISA funds was about $7.9 million for the Nashville UZA, and then an additional nearly $800,000 available for the Murfreesboro UZA. The one difference between those being the obligation deadline. The Murfreesboro deadline is a shortened deadline of December 31st, 2022, whereas the Nashville area at Nashville UZA has until September 30th, 2024. And so we, as you recall, we had a call for projects that identified higher priority projects being those that are have the more likely to be implemented in the short term, kind of less complex, lower cost projects. You'll see a number of those potential project types that we were encouraging, and through the pre-application process, it was kind of a non-traditional funding product that came available to us, and so the pre-application, I think, was successful in that we got a lot of different project types that we typically don't receive through other grant programs or set-asides, and we received 27 total applications from 17 different applicants, and totaling about $20 million in total requests. And the number of projects, kind of broken down by project type for you in this table. Some of the top projects that we received were a number of ADA related improvements, a lot of proposed improvements to implement a lot of those deficiencies identified in ADA transition plans. Also, a number of transit project requests, as well as pedestrian safety improvements. And so we are kind of, we'll give you an update on where we are in the process. I know that we anticipated having that formal application process underway. We're slightly behind schedule. And so I'll tell you kind of some of the immediate the things that we've done through our initial screening and our immediate next steps. And so one item to note is that because there was only one project submitted within the Murfreesboro UZA, that being a ITS improvement project submitted by the city of Murfreesboro, and the shortened deadline that they're under, we awarded that funding to Murfreesboro, and we've included it in this tip amendment cycle so that they're not held up another 3 months. And so that's one action that is immediate that we've taken. We are continuing to finalize our review of the pre-applications within the Nashville UZA, the remaining 26 applications, and we will be notifying applicants of that determination by the end of the week so that we can open the formal application process for those that get the green light to go forward with the full application. And so if you go to the next slide, Daniel, just kind of a preview of that formal application process. The level of detail that was provided through the pre-application process, I would say varied, between what we would expect through a pre-application process of kind of the basic information associated with the project to some of you provided basically a full application. And so appreciate the effort and the information that you provided. So we don't want to penalize those who provided more information. We don't want you to have to repeat what you've already said, but we would like to dig in a little bit more to the level of detail, identifying kind of what those, the kind of justification of those proposed improvements, really clarifying what that location and termini looks like for the project area, and how that project is aligning or addressing some of the COVID-related impacts. We'd also like to further kind of detail that schedule and budget, not only by kind of the different milestones that you're going to be going through in the development process, but also in case, what are some of the strategies or actions that you're proactively taking in order to meet these shortened deadlines, tight obligation deadlines. And then similarly on the budget side, kind of breaking out that cost and estimated costs by each of those phases of work in order to identify if there's going to be needs for right-of-way, NEPA design, construction, and then similarly looking through any proactive strategies or actions to handle cost overruns beyond what you've requested in the grant amount. And then some of you provided a map. That's another thing just to help clarify what that project description and termini entails that we'll be requesting in the formal application process. So if we go to the next slide and just talk through the slight revisions to the schedule, I think initially we had August 2nd through the 20th for the formal application period. What we'll do, given that we're running slightly behind schedule, is to push that out a week so that the formal application process starts next week. We give you still the 2 weeks to finalize that formal application process, and then we'll take the week out of staff's evaluation of those applications so that we stay on schedule and get the awards announced by September 15th, and then process those through the tip amendment by December. So that's just a quick update. Is there any initial questions, comments?
I do have one. You might go back a few slides.
Okay.
To the one where you're talking about the breakdown by category. What is, I think it sounds like a stupid question, but for instance, Mount Juliet has a pedestrian improvement reconstruction of sidewalk along Old Lebanon Dirt Road for pedestrian safety. But if you look at the description, it also includes ADA compliant infrastructure. So how can you differentiate between ADA improvement projects versus pedestrian safety improvements?
Yeah, that was a tough one because I think they could be combined together. We pulled out the ADA in particular, just because a lot of those projects stemmed from citing the ADA transition plan as kind of the justification and background behind the proposed improvements. Whereas some of the pedestrian safety improvements were more maybe standalone projects at specific locations that maybe have safety deficiencies.
And I'm assuming, even though you're talking about the final application process being pushed back a week, I'm assuming pretty well all projects are over. So what you've got in this list is all the projects that are eligible to go forward with the finalized application process. You're not taking on the additional ones.
That's correct. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sean?
Yes.
This is Bill McCord over in Gallatin. I want to clarify, all of the projects that were submitted in the pre-application process eligible for submittal of a formal application?
No, we will notify those applicants, whether they proceed to the full application or if, based on our initial screening, we identify that certain projects either aren't eligible or not consistent with the guidance in the COVID relief call.
Okay, because I realize that there's only about 38.8% of the funds available for these projects, since there's over 20 million in requests and only 7.9 million to fund. So is that how y'all are going to make the decision, is based on the limited funding, or whether it meets the scope of the application requirements?
Yeah, well, kind of a two-step process. Of one, with the initial screening from the pre-app, identifying any projects that won't advance to the formal, and then once the formal applications are completed, we will then evaluate those and still have to prioritize which ones there's funding available to award and which ones we might have to identify another funding opportunity to pursue.
Okay, so each of the persons who are selected to submit a formal application will be sent an email or some notification next Monday?
Before Monday, that's correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Great questions. Any more questions for Sean? Thank you, Sean. With that, we'll move on to our next informational item today, which is proposed amendments to the fiscal year 2020 to 2023 Transportation Improvement Program. And Anna will present this one for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Daniel and I are going to move up here because he's going to drive our TIP amendment tracking application. If you guys remember, you guys saw this application in our last cycle of TIP amendments, something that was created by our wonderful staff member, Ashley Glasscock, to help us with both our visuals for our amendments that we're presenting, as well as keeping a historical tabulation of the amendments to the TIP as they progress over the fiscal years. So this is the final cycle of amendments that we're going to have for fiscal year 2021. We have 10 proposed amendments for your consideration this time around. The first of those being a request from Hendersonville for their Main Street Sidewalk Improvements project. This is a request to add the project to the TIP with funding that was awarded to Hendersonville through Tdot's Multimodal Access Grant Program. Following that, we have a request from Smyrna for Lowry Street Multimodal Improvements, Phase 3. This was also a project that was awarded to Smyrna through the Multimodal Access Program. Then we have a request from Gallatin for the Vol State Gap Trail, Phase 1. Also requesting to add the project to the TIP as a result of being awarded funds to the Tdot Multimodal Access Grant Program. have a request from Metro Nashville for a downtown neighborhood traffic study. This is an effort that's being conducted in partnership between Metro, WeGo, and the Nashville Downtown Partnership. This project is being partially funded with FTA 5307 funds being contributed from WeGo, which really prompted the need to add this project to the TIP because of the existence of those federal funds. There are also local funds as well as a $200,000 urban transportation planning grant from Tdot in the mix on this project. Following that, we have another request from Hendersonville for the Rocklin Road widening and extension. This was an existing TIP project, but we're revising the project name to add the extension portion as well as revising the scope and termini to incorporate that extension portion. This is a small extension to the existing roadway in order to align it with another road. That full scope was contained in our long range plan. We're just updating that information for the TIP. And then following that, we have a request from Tdot for the South Mount Juliet Road widening project that's taking place in Mount Juliet. We're revising the project name and the termini because previously, as listed in the TIP, it said that the project was extending to Providence Parkway. That's being corrected to Providence Way. Also, Tdot is adding STBG funding to the project. Following that, we have a request from Tdot that really spans over the next 3 amendments. The first listing for the Nashville area I-40 Smartway expansion project. This is the existing projects page in the TIP. Tdot's removing the funds from this record and splitting the projects into 2 separate projects, which are the 2 amendment proposals that follow. The first half of the project being on one page, and that is from I-40 to US 70. And then the second project being from near Earhart Road to near US 70. So the request is to add these 2 new projects to the TIP with their associated funding. And then finally, as Sean mentioned, when he was going over the COVID relief call for projects with you guys, we are adding the project that's being awarded to Murfreesboro for their Memorial Boulevard Traffic Signal Improvement Project. Again, they were the only applicant from the Murfreesboro UZA for those funds, and due to their very much shortened deadline that they have on those funds, we want to go ahead and get this project into the TIP. So as usual, I'm happy to take any questions anybody may have about this slate of proposed amendments.
Anna, this may be Jonathan, may be able to answer the ITS projects. Do we know a letting schedule for those?
We do not. So one of the reasons why this was split into kind of a east of Nashville and west of Nashville, is there is a communications company called Asprey, who is looking at putting fiber all the way from Northern Virginia down 81 and then to I-40 from Knoxville west to Nashville. So one of the reasons they split the project is because if this communication company will lay the fiber, it can save Tdot a lot of money. So especially looking at your corridor, but you're east of Nashville, that's kind of where we're at right now. So it has the potential to save Tdot a lot of money. They lay this. It'd be a dedicated line for Tdot. So as far as timeline, it's on that we get that contract. So
Sounds good. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Hey, Ann, I have a technical question about the Cycle D, I guess, amendments. The urban transportation planning grant that was awarded to Sumner County communities, it's all state funds, but I know we're adding it to the UPWP. Should that also be included in the TIP, but even though it's not federal funded?
It doesn't need to be. It's covered in the UPWP, so that will suffice for that funding type.
Okay. That's fine. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a general question. May apply to everything that we're talking about in this board. That's public chapter 300, which is passed the legislature. We are trying to incorporate, what it's dealing with is the National Pipeline Database. And each, for those of you who don't know, each of the planning commissions, regional planning commissions in the area or in the state are supposed to go to the National Pipeline Database and download the database and try to incorporate it into any map and GIS that we've got. And within 660 feet, either side of that pipeline, which is roughly a 4-mile swath, any development, site plan or subdivision development that occurs or improvements that occur are supposed to get some kind of correspondence from the pipeline company that operates that pipeline before they can proceed. Now, it's questionable how extensive that could be from our perspective, but it sounds almost like they just bought themselves a 4-mile easement across everybody's property and just read the together. But the reason I bring it up is those pipelines obviously cross several of our transportation networks as well. And don't know if that would have any impact on the project.
It will, they'll have a lot of leeway. So typically what we run into with developments is they have a lot of leeway with regard to what you can construct over the pipeline, especially in existing easements. So what we run into is when we try to run anything larger than about a 2-lane roadway, they will tell us no, we got to upgrade pipes. We've got several, I think in Franklin, we've actually got Colonial Pipeline running kind of crisscross through Williamson County. Several other counties probably have the same sort of pipeline. And I always get this wrong. It's either 2 30-inch and a 36 or 2 36 and a 30-inch liquid high pressure gas lines running. And I believe the easement's 250 feet wide. And right now we're trying to run, and with cooperation with Brentwood, we're running several different alignments for an extension of McEwen Drive, phase 5, which is more than anybody wants to know. But we're probably going to end up having to spend several $1 million to upgrade that pipeline for them because they sit there and let it age over the years. And anytime you go across them, rather than them upgrade it and upgrade their infrastructure, they're going to let whoever is putting in the facility upgrade their infrastructure.
And my question with the new public chapter is, to me, it seems as though they've got an unpaid for 1/4-mile wide that requires their say-so before anybody does anything with it. 660 other side of the line. And I mean, if you're in a utility, they've got something nice to do with it what they will. What the state did appears to me to grant them an additional about 660 feet. You could have significant impacts on all of us, both in our product development, but also potentially in regard to the growth and transportation program. But for track, at least finding out a little bit more about it from the NPO staff perspective, I think can get back to us on it.
That's something you all could put an interpretation together.
Yeah.
That requirement, even when they cross an existing roadway, you're widening roadway and buying additional right of way. They may be crossing your existing right of way, but where you're going from maybe 40 feet or 50 foot right of way to 100 foot or 80 foot right of way, you're buying additional right of way. Like you need to drive all over in Williamson County or any other county and see pinch points where we've had to, just to save money, narrow the roadway section down.
So you're not buying.
So you're not buying even or having, not really the even we're worried about, it's having to upgrade your pipes.
Yeah, we can definitely look into that. Is the data publicly available?
Yeah, public chapter
The database.
300, it's signed, it's
Okay.
all.
Okay.
I wonder if TAP has done research on it.
Yeah, we can look into it. And I think it might fit into our next presentation on our data tools and potential layers that would enhance or complement a lot of the location data that we currently have on our website.
Thank you, Ms. Emerson. Are there any other follow-up questions regarding the SIP amendments? Hearing none, we will move on to our next informational item, which is an overview of data sets, tools, and software for local application. Mike Baker will lead us on that one.
Thanks, Glenn. I'll be going over a couple of the data tools that our team has put together over the last couple of months. I think a lot of you are familiar with a lot of the online applications that we created as a part of the Regional Transportation Plan update. Just wanted to refresh that and let you guys know that they're still out there. They're still being maintained, and in some ways even enhanced, and we're getting new ones. So we've got a couple of folks on staff today that will be letting you know about that. You know, there's several different use cases for these tools beyond just satisfying your general curiosities. We can definitely address items like Tom just spoke to with the pipeline information. We can easily gather that from an online source and put it into one of these tools if you reach out to us. So we've got a little question set at the end that kind of hits at what can we be doing better. You know, we've definitely come a long way in providing digital tools to the TCC and our membership, but we want to obviously make them better in any way that we can. So we appreciate any comments that you have for us. But, you know, what else can they be used for? I think a lot of times we hear a person from the public say, this is the most dangerous area in all the region. You have to fix this one location. And so what we've tried to accomplish with these tools are giving a very fair data-driven approach where you can say, well, you know, there are crashes here, but it may not be the most dangerous, or you can't develop this area because it's environmentally sensitive. Well, you can actually go and look at areas that are identified as being environmentally sensitive. So that's one of the goals that we have with these tools. Another is being able to understand your population. So if you have a project that goes through a certain area that you think might have certain populations, either limited English speaking or minority groups that are present, you can actually understand what languages might be spoken or what these minority groups might be. And then obviously, like I just spoke to, the environmental data, it can be used to screen almost like a pre-NEPA before you get to determining what ultimate alignments might be. So 3 of the tools that we'll be discussing today are Arc Online tools. If you're not familiar with that platform, it's a Esri product and allows us to post an interactive map with a whole host of layers. I'll have Carson Cooper and Ashley Glasscock going over those, and then we'll turn back to some of our dashboards that we've created recently that hit at safety and some of the demand as we return opening from the pandemic. So with that, I'll let Carson speak to 2 applications that she's familiar with.
Yeah, one quick question, Matt.
Sure.
If we see any data on there, are you guys willing to let us ask for exports of data just so we can manipulate some of that internally on our own?
Yes, and for the most part, if it is something that we have been given approval to redistribute, it's openly free. So a lot of times people will call and say, can we have a copy of your Sidewalk network? And we just send them a link and say, download it, use it as you please.
Thank you.
But if it's something that you don't have access to, let us know and we will get it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Carson Cooper. I've only done it here a couple of times, and honestly, over the last 1.5 years, you recognize me. And I used to be on the Access team, but as of a month ago, I'm now on the planning team, but still pretty familiar with data, just wanted to introduce myself. So this is our environmental planning app. Has a lot of information in here, and we've tried to source where it's coming from, whether it's TDOT information or USFWS information, USDA, or kind of a composite layer done in-house. And if you have any questions about what these layers mean, we have another slide in the PowerPoint that will be available after that kind of explains the uses of some of the composite layers. So this is kind of an example of one of those composites, environmentally sensitive areas. This was used by staff in-house when we evaluated projects for the RTP. So these aren't areas you have to avoid because they're obviously a lot of the region, but they're kind of the areas that you need to consider the environmental impacts, and maybe your NEPA process will be a little bit more difficult and you'll have to do more of that minimizing, avoidance, or adaptation strategies. And so environmental challenges is kind of a subset of those factors, and these are going to be the like highly complex environmental issues such as steep slopes or critical habitat, National Register, historic places. So these are the areas that you really do want to avoid, or you're going to have a lot more through the NEPA process, as well as project complexity and project costs are just going to be a lot higher.
Are there subcategories underneath those? Like,
Yes.
Like the arrow?
Well, so the arrows are just going to show you like the symbology, but so both of those are composites of every layer you see here.
Okay.
So you can like scroll all the way down.
I didn't know there was something that said what the challenge was, like to break it further down by matching out the arrow. That's all I'm asking.
So that PowerPoint slide I mentioned, it like has a list of what makes up the challenges. And so, but also all of those layers are listed within here, so you can just go through them. So floodplains is obviously one that we all look at a lot. And you can get that through the FEMA site, but you can also look at it in tandem with all the other layers that we have listed here. And as Max said, at the end, we're going to kind of go around and see like what additional layers do you need, what additional functionalities do you need, such as an export function, or I mean, if the symbology or visualization isn't, you know, conducive to what you're like interested in, we definitely want to hear all of that information. So I'm just going to move on to another application. And so this one is more of our equity and demographic based application. And so this is showing that degrees of vulnerability score that we've presented on in the past. It's looking at 9 key populations that we identified as vulnerable or having low access to opportunities or historical disadvantage. And these are areas where they are above the regional average as a concentration of that population. Either one population above average or all 9. And so these are kind of areas that need special consideration for public engagement, or kind of what are the actual needs in those areas and reevaluating that. And so this is that composite score, but again, all of those populations are listed below. So you can look at high concentrations of Hispanic populations, and so you might need to have public engagement that is translated into Spanish. Separately, we have a limited English households layer. And so it may not be just Spanish, but it could be other languages, especially in the South Nashville area. There's a lot of Kurdish or Asian or other populations. So it's again, just kind of those EJ requirements through the NEPA process and public engagement, but having the demographics readily available of like where your project area is and maybe some of those hard to reach populations. We're just trying to get the information out there. But these are just our vulnerable populations. So again, if there's any other demographics that you're really interested in, please let us know. We're happy to put those on there. We have some other ones on here, like our housing and transportation costs. So maybe cost burden areas that might benefit from more, you know, public transit or access. So again, lots of information, but please let us know if there's other things you'd like to know. And I'm going to hand it to Ashley. We'll talk a little bit more about the infrastructure.
Hi, I'm Ashley Glasscott, formerly Ashley Reeves. This is the congestion and safety related application, and what you're seeing right now is the top 5 worst congested links and the top 5 worst crash locations. So say you have someone that's like, you know, Nolensville and Harding Place is the most dangerous area. That's wrong. it's one of the top 5 worst areas. And so then we want to see why it's congested. We can look at the percent free flow for 2017 and see that it's moderately congested. And we can also look at 2025 going into the future to see how that whole area becomes increasingly worse. You can also look at what year each of these congested links becomes congested. So you get a little bit further level of detail, like this one doesn't get congested until 2025. This one's already congested at 2017. And then if you want to look at the safety issues, so it shows it with the top 5 worst crash location. And if we want to see why, fatal crashes, there's a ton happening right at that close intersection. If we want to see trucks, we can see truck crashes. Those are also happening in that center location, as well as non-motorists. So it gives kind of an explanation and further level of detail into why that area may be the way it is. You also have the ability to look at, non-motorist crashes alongside greenways and trails, bike lanes, sidewalks, seeing what the infrastructure is like there to see if it's possible that we're creating more exposure in that area, so on and so forth. So there's plenty of layers that you can add in. You can add in population density, you can look at employment density, you can look at traffic locations, tourist attractions, kind of anything that you need, you can turn on and off. And the conversation for crashes kind of leads me into the month-to-date tracking. So I know a lot of people are interested to see what has been happening in terms of safety since the pandemic. And what's interesting about this is we have our 2021 targets that we set a few months ago. You can filter by different counties compared to counties to other counties. You can also look by mode. And if we look, for truck crashes, they won't want to update. We can see that there was an increase during the pandemic, during 2020, and then there was a massive increase after about 2021. And this is updated every month in. So I look at it every 30 days to try to make sure that we're as current as we can be. And what's also interesting is you can look at severity. So we can go to fatal accidents, and we can also see there was a massive increase in before the pandemic. And down below, you can look at the trends over time. So you can see that we were trending above average for 2020.
Can you go back to the map function problem?
Yeah, absolutely.
Backward. Up there with your print button, if you hit that, what happens? Just curious.
You print I print this screen.
So it's just gonna print the screen. Is there any way to do that to where it prints kind of a formalized PDF that you can type in whatever the title you want on it? And I mean, I know we do that in our own portal in Wilson County where you can print a snapshot of a parcel with zoning or aerial or whatever you want on it. And you type in whatever the title of it, map parcel number, family name, whatever. And then it formats it in such a way that it's got maybe the legend of the north arrow and everything in a templated thing. It's a PDF that you can then print off or send to somebody rather than just a screenshot that's kind of open-ended.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it has.
Look at that.
I think that I have a function
That
of
would be
like,
nice.
this will let you change the extent and the spatial reference scale bar. But it,
Yeah, we can look into it since it's a history hosted, framework. We'll just have to dig in and see what's
And I don't
possible.
mind saying for anybody to go at the bottom, that would actually help me. Okay, yeah.
All right, and I was going to show off one of our newer dashboards. This is one that was put together by Paul Ballinger back in the back. He's been working part-time for us for the last couple of months, and this one is conglomeration of HPMS data that was supplied by State Department of Transportation, the INRIX data, which is supplied by RITUS, and the volume data, which was supplied by Streetlight Inc., who is a location-based service company. They take cell phone information, Bluetooth information, and have estimated monthly vehicle miles traveled for each county. So it's really, really neat information. You can see here how in 2021, we've actually rebounded in some cases beyond what the 2019 value for VMT is. And one might think, well, if we're experiencing more vehicle miles traveled than we were pre-pandemic, why is congestion not as bad as it was, or as at least as we remember it was? And what we've been able to find out is through the speed information. Yeah, we do have more people out there, but our speeds are dramatically faster. And in fact, there's about a 5 mile per hour average across the 7-county region speed increase, even during free flow. So at a time when little to nobody is on the network, people are just driving faster. They have been since about July of last year, deciding to travel at a much faster rate than they used to. Another reason for it is just the general smoothing. So you can tell that now that people have a little bit more flexibility with the time that they come into work, the time they leave to work, how they manage their lunch break. We're not experiencing those deep speed reductions in the AM and PM peak hour. And so what this application does for you, it allows you to compare to the previous year in terms of speed or vehicle miles traveled, allows you to compare monthly. You can actually sort it just by month. So April was kind of the peak of the stay-at-home orders. So you can see in 2020, vehicle miles traveled was very, very low in comparison to 2019. And then in 2021, like I said, it rebounded with fury, but we did not expect to see the same behavior, right? We've got more people out there, but they're not behaving the same way that they did prior to the. So we hope that this one is very valuable for you guys, just to be able to monitor and understand how behavior changes are maximizing the efficiency of the network. That back to. So the questions to consider. So this is kind of, is this stuff valuable for you guys? Are you finding it beneficial in your day-to-day work? What can we do to help? What can we be doing better? So we already heard from Tom, additional layers. I think we can get the pipeline information, maybe even do a buffer analysis and get that loaded in on one of our applications and share that with you guys. Are there any additional functions that you would like to see beyond maybe the PDF ability or custom map?
I want to think the ability to export the data and get stuff. I think the ability to kind of self-service export the data would be great, just to not have to bug you guys all the time to export data. One thing, this is great to have the single source of information when we're all using the same source. We're all comparing the same data and using the same data. Plus, you guys are compiling all the data, so there's not 27 of us trying to get the data from the same person over in the state, the safety office or Tdot or something like that. Is there, and if you have the level of detail, it's great. If you don't, I understand that as well. Is there ability to filter down to the municipality level? That would be useful for us as well.
Most of our data sets we do at the regional level, they are all drawn to scale, either based on local information. So I guess what you may not know is that we have a request that goes out to your city GIS, and you are probably involved in the procurement of that on annual, sometimes more frequent, sometimes less frequent basis. So say for City of Franklin, we will ask for sidewalk, greenways, streets, and then we'll incorporate that into our regional data set.
And for me, it's more about like safety data. So I'm assuming you're contacting the Department of Safety to get that information.
Correct.
So it would be helpful for us to know like location down to the city level for that, for us to sort information, intersections in our jurisdiction, to be able to show that to our local councils and aldermen and citizens. Okay. To help plan projects. If that level of detail.
Yeah, it's available at the XY location. So it's a point. But I see what you're saying, like the scale of it. So is this part of the city more dangerous than this part of the city?
Correct, that's exactly right.
Okay.
And the one other thing I would ask, this is more just for thought for the group for the future. with additional planning funding in the future, one of the things you showed up there was streetlight data. We've had great success using that as a tool to help project traffic flow and compare traffic flow overall movement. While it's only like a 10 to 15% subset of the traffic, it does collect that 10 or 15% subset of traffic throughout the whole area because it's using that anonymous data from cell phone data of traffic that's out there anyway. The problem is it's very, very expensive for us to use. Like a single study costs about $10,000. If you want an enterprise, like $50,000 per city, most cities are not going to fund that. You're going to go to your alderman, city administrator, whoever, they're going to say, for a study, no, we're not doing that. It would be interesting to see if we could use some future planning funding for to be able to purchase some sort of mega shared pool license for us as a group to be able to access that data and use for studies. Just something to consider.
So we've definitely considered it. I promise I didn't plan you for that question to get raised.
The only issue is I don't know what that would look like for, for as big a group as.
We've already explored it. So we've already reached out to Streetlight to find out how much different levels of information might cost. We've also gone into pretty great detail on vetting the information that's coming out of it. That's part of why we got the VMT data, was to find out, are the numbers even passing the smell test? And they seemingly do. They offer everything from origin, destination, vehicle miles traveled. What's of great interest to us is the ability to understand where people are. Where people are walking and biking, not only in volume, but where they're walking and biking to, what time of day. It's a whole host of information. I think that's something that we would be more than happy to present to you guys what a regional subscription might look.
Yeah, that's something we really have found successful with. It really like watching patterns. Even a small subset of a large data pool is successfully shows you the patterns in an area. So,
I have one other, and you may already have this somewhere in there that I just haven't looked at, but I've been playing around a little bit with data tapestry and talked with Mount Juliet GIS director. Apparently had a contract for a little while. Tapestry is I guess it's kind of an economic development tool. It kind of unfortunate in some way. It classifies our population by cultural tendencies and talks about kind of, well, this area is great. I forget what they call them, southern satellites. This area is green acres, and then it has a description of what these people generally spend their time doing. And stuff like that. If there is a better product than Tapestry, I'm all ears on that as well. But something along those lines might help us on some of our local land use planning when we're doing inventory analysis.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with Esri's Tapestry, just because, like you said, it does require a subscription. We haven't had access to it. I know that Data Axle, former Info Group, they offered something very similar. It used to be called Info Group, now it's called Data Axle. They offer a very similar service where they characterize the demographics of particular areas, mostly for market-based.
I think at least as an opening volley with your public, when you're talking about a land use plan update or something like that, it's a good place to start. This is what the data says about you. What's wrong, different, educational things and stuff like that.
I love the idea of size collection there. But it's actually pretty good. But community campus is a modular management. It's like 50 bucks. I use it in my house for a little bit, but you can kind of go into some analysis on your community, some camp room, create areas.
Yeah.
That, like I said, it's about 50 bucks. It was the last time I looked at it. It's in front of, but it's only on face, so.
That might be something for y'all to look at.
Okay.
I'll just echo what John was saying. I think present wise, we'll be parts of the street line data. We do the all this survey and work survey that collects information from our existing riders. That's every 4 or 5 years, but maybe I'll just supplement that. Based on those surveys, we know that a lot of our ridership has access to smartphones. For us, but supplement sometimes. So we something can be worked out to get access to that, we'll definitely be present.
Yeah, and I know they have each zone separate, which is nice, but also the ability to understand the chaining. So if you're riding your bike to a place where you put it in a locker, then walking to the station, I think they have the ability to chain those trips together.
That'd be great to know. We've talked to some other companies in the past, but a lot of them have more experience with fixed transit fixed skyway, like trains and all, not that much with buses. So that would, it's something we would like to know more about.
And I think the systems that have TFS might benefit more. So I'm not exactly sure once we get to the other transit entities, it may not be as robust, but for those that do have GTFS, I know that it is much better.
Thank you, Ashley, Carson, and Matt. Are there any follow-up questions for them? So these two links, maps and dashboards, will get us pretty much all the information.
Correct. It'll get you to both. And then we also have the open data portal, which is all the maps beyond that were shown today. And we posted it previously, but I can get that out.
That'd be great. And if we have any questions or comments at that point, who is the best contact?
Myself.
Okay. Thank you. That moves us on to regular reports. And I believe we have Elizabeth Watkins with the Federal Highway online. Elizabeth, do you have any reports for us today?
Yes, just a few quick updates. As you mentioned, I'm representing FHWA while Sean Santaya is out on a rotational assignment. So I look forward to being a part of the TCC over the next few months. Sean expects to return in early November. So if you need anything from FHWA between now and then, please let me know. The only other two quick updates I had, as many of you know, the FAST Act expires at the end of September. And you may have heard that the Senate advanced a proposed federal infrastructure package, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, to the floor for debate on August 1st. We'll continue to monitor the progress in Congress and be sure to pass any information as we receive it. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for our Federal Highway friends? Hearing none, we'll move to the Tdot report, and Mr. Russell with Tdot will fill us in on that one.
All right, just really quick, on Monday, Tdot released the statewide active transportation plan update, which is the first update of any kind when referring to walking, biking since 2005. A lot of that has to do with internal action items that Tdot can do to better use walking and biking products. It kind of recommendations over 5 years of things that the department can do to better help the output and projects. So take a look at that online. It's the statewide active transportation plan. And also just really quick, the Cmac update. Our Cmac office asked the National MPO to help scoring the projects that were submitted. So MPO, I believe, has until next Friday, 13th, to rank those projects. And Tdot will hopefully release those. That is everything for me.
Thank you. Any questions regarding that report?
John, one question. Knowing Tdot has gone through pretty extensive overhaul, not only design standards, typical sections, things like that, design drawing, well, multimodal over the past few years. Out of the plan, make changes as far as design standards that next step, you mentioned internal. I didn't know if that's because I know, having gone through some of the planning process on state route recently, guidelines in the design standards for multimodal has been to push to the minimums from Tdot staff, design staff, whereas the guideline push best practices. What we have encountered is a push to the minimums. I'm curious if there is a push to say, not going to the minimums, going to recommendations. For instance, we were basically told if we wanted to go to the recommendation, we would have to pay the difference. And so that's obviously not the best. So I didn't know if something like that was going to come out of this.
Sure. So anyone who did hear, the question is, as far as Tdot design guidelines go, a lot of times Tdot says more go towards the minimum instead of the actual recommended. That was a big push. And actually this document changed in the middle of being created. It was supposed to be a more outward facing document. And I think the consultants understood that this really needed to be more internal document. So this document does exactly what you say. It basically pushes Tdot department-wide division by division to make sure that we're living up to what we claim. So yeah, we didn't know the output would be an internal document, and realistically it's not, but in practicality, it's telling Tdot it's setting a 5-year horizon to basically get to a great point. And some of them strides have already been made, but like you said, yeah. Tdot usually has a price tag, and they want to do the best they can for multimodal way they have. And a lot of times things push to the back burner. So you're exactly right. So hopefully that changes.
Appreciate it, John.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll move on to the chair's report. It is time to appoint a nominating committee for our next chair and vice chair. With that, I would like to nominate Joe Horn, Tom Bashir, and Doug Mossy to fill that committee and elect our next or propose our next candidates for chair and vice chair. Do we have to vote on that, or is that just? We're not allowed to.
Next month.
Yeah.
But you don't have to.
But we don't have to vote on the committee, so.
Chair.
That is all I have for the chair's report. So now we'll move on to staff report, and Ms. Emerson will provide that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you guys will look in your meeting packet at agenda item 5D, you will find some fold out pages that are our old friend, the TIP project tracker. So what we're requesting from you right now, as we kind of try to stick to a quarterly schedule of asking all of you guys to update this for us, you're going to receive in your recap email following this meeting a link to an Excel version of this that will include columns where you can provide some open-ended commentary on the status of these projects. If you guys can just take a look at the projects that are within your jurisdiction and provide us with any necessary updates by Wednesday next week, which is August 11th, you can provide that to me. We would appreciate it. We will then pass this information along to Tdot local programs that'll help us fill in any necessary gaps, help us keep this tracker as up to date as possible so we know where all your projects stand. We'd appreciate it, and that's all I have. Oh, actually, it's not. Following the tip tracker pages, you'll see that we have included some pages depicting the adjustments and amendments that have been performed on the current tip to date. You'll see when you get the Excel version of the tracker that there are tabs added that include these records of adjustments and amendments. These, of course, you can also view within our tip application, but we thought it might be helpful just for informational purposes to be able to look over these. We'll note that they also include adjustments and amendments that have been made to Tdot projects. I know they aren't always super visible to all of our locals, so we're able to view those easily on these tabs and just kind of follow the money easier on these projects. But that really is it for me.
Thank you. So everyone look out for that information so you can provide the required feedback. Now Sean will tell us about a project delivery task force.
Thank you, Chair. Last item I just wanted to mention is give you a preview of Project Delivery Task Force. You mentioned it under the UPWP. This is a new committee or task force that we'd like to kick off, focused particularly on what Anna had just mentioned of helping ensure the timely obligation of that federal funds that we're getting and tracking the progress of those projects through the TIP. And what we're hoping for is to compile or recruit some participants for this, not only including member jurisdictions, but some of those other implementing agencies and relevant Tdot divisions, as they're heavily involved in the project development process from multiple angles. And then this will be chaired by our former TPD chair, Smyrna Mayor, Mary Esther Reed. And the kind of charge of this group is, not only identifying these projects that are falling behind schedule, but also identifying what some of those reasons might be, and identifying some strategies or actions that we can take to mitigate some of those issues. And I think to begin with, we're looking at kind of a quarterly meeting frequency, and I think we provide a number of TIP updates to you all and project updates, but some of these issues just take even more time and effort, and so this task force will allow us some additional focus on this issue. And so looking forward to kicking that off, and if there's any eager participants, we're going through that process to nail down who's going to be participating, and so feel free to reach out to me or Mary Esther Reed.
Hey, Sean, pencil me in on that.
You've been targeted. And then we'll expect those follow-up links in an email from me, not only the data tools, but also the project tracker that Anna mentioned. That's all for me.
Thanks, Sean. With that, we'll move on to other business. Any other business before us today?
In August, so.
County Fair starts Friday. Come down.
Thank you all for joining us today, and looks like we'll be in this room till the end of the year, and we will see you next month.